It just might be time to begin replacing parents with robots. I'm Greg Bear, and I wish I were joking here, but let's look at the evidence. In the past 10 years alone, many studies of children strongly demonstrate that there have been dramatic increases, explosive increases in depression, anxiety, drug overdoses, cutting, bulimia, suicidal thoughts, addictions to social media, porn, and video games. That's quite a list, isn't it? And that's a partial list. And almost everybody watching this can identify with one or more of those. All the statistics have one unifying message. Our children are very, very unhappy. This is indisputable. But what is our reaction as parents to this rising tide of misery? Pretty much nothing. There has been almost no parental acceptance of personal responsibility. Instead, parents are loudly blaming other people and institutions, schools, teachers, administrators, drug companies, guns, social media, and on and on. Go on the internet, look at the complaints. But where is the public movement with banners, a marketing budget, marches in the streets, and widespread outrage saying parents are responsible? Where are the parents who are screaming, we must learn to be better parents? It's unimaginable, actually. A march of people saying we're responsible? Nah, not a peep, not a hint. For the past 30 years, I've been speaking about parents being primarily responsible for the happiness of their children, almost a lone voice in the wilderness. A concept that I thought would be obvious, since parents entirely oversee their children in the first few years of a child's life, the most formative years neurologically. Even by age 13, a child has spent only 10% of his life in school. The rest of his life with us, the parents. In recent years, however, as I've been more vocal in public discussions about parenting, the overall reactions of other people on these public forums have been just dismissive. Oh, are you going to talk about this again? Parents being responsible, or defensive. How dare you tell us that our children's behavior might be due to some flaw in our parenting? As parents, we just can't face the possibility that our children are unhappy primarily because of, the people who raised them, us. But who else is there to blame? What is the one common thread running through everything in our children's lives? Us. We brought them into the world. We taught them the nature of the world. We taught them how to behave in the world. So if our kids are not happy, how could we possibly blame other people or institutions who are really only involved tangentially and briefly? In order to illustrate how parents see their responsibility for their children, let's look at just one typical parent, Mark. But we'll make it an allegory. We'll experiment. Where Mark is bringing me his car that is not working, his automobile. Sometimes we can stomach hearing a lesson in a metaphor that we couldn't hear in real life. So Mark brings me his car and he says, car's got no power. I press on the gas, not much happens. And when it does move, there's this terrible screeching noise. Well, that's a pretty terrible thing for a car. So I put the car on a lift, I examine it from underneath, and I say to Mark, there's almost no oil in the oil pan. And it was thick as tar. I'm surprised your engine worked at all. Oil in the oil pan is what lubricates, everything in the engine. And Mark says, well, how'd that happen? And I say, well, the oil and filter should be changed every 5,000 miles or so, and I'm just guessing that yours has never been changed. And he says, well, nobody told me. The owner's manual tells you. It's in the glove box right there in your car. Well, nobody at the dealership told me it was there. Have you ever bought a new appliance? I asked. Sure, got a microwave recently. There were a lot of buttons and settings. Yeah? When you took it out of the box, you went, buttons everywhere. And he said, yeah. I said, did you look at the owner's manual? He said, duh. I said, well, that works for a car, too. He says, I guess so. Seems like the oil should last longer than 5,000 miles, though. I said, well, that would be nice, but the engine heats up, and when the engine gets hot, it really just tears up the oil. And that shrieking noise, that's your wheels running on the asphalt. All 4 tires are flat. Nobody put air in them, so they got flat, and the rims tore up the tires and scraped on the road, and that's what's making that terrible noise. And he says, well, they should make better tires. Mark stood by while all these years he stood by while his vehicle fell apart unnecessarily. I mean, this sounds comical. We're laughing, going, nobody could be that stupid. Turns out, yeah, I've actually known people who've done this with their cars, and we do it with our kids all the time. He didn't do anything directly to injure his car, but with inattention alone, just not paying attention, he destroyed a valuable car that could have run for many more years, possibly hundreds of thousands of miles. This story should sound impossibly comical. Nobody could be this dumb. But this is what we do with our kids. We expect kids magically to become responsible and happy. We provide them a house, food, clothing, entertainment, but we do not help them build and maintain their emotional engines. Without the unconditional love they need, children uniformly begin to respond to their pain. They whine, like the car, resist our instructions, tease their siblings, torment each other, spew their anger, withdraw from us, fail to be responsible, and bury their faces and their souls and minds in screens. But we ignore these warning signs, so the behaviors worsen. You're thinking, what could be worse? Oh, lots. They worsen to depression, anxiety, self-harm, suicidal thoughts, violence, and on and on. Finally, we pay attention to these more serious problems, but by then, there is nothing but sludge in the nearly empty oil pan, and sometimes the engine cannot be repaired. Often, our kids are doomed because we neglected them. I get to see them as adults, and they're almost unhelpable. I'm Greg Bear, and for 30 years, I've been teaching the principles that create and maintain happiness in our children. And I can state firsthand that overall, we are not paying attention. The statistics, in fact, are rapidly worsening in every category that warns us that our children are not emotionally or mentally healthy, which means we can't be paying attention. Because we are failing as parents, and there's no accusation to that, we're just not doing what it takes. I suggest, somewhat tongue-in-cheek, that robots couldn't be worse in loving and teaching our children. No, robots probably can't genuinely love our children, so far, but they can be programmed to at least avoid the harm that we're doing to our children when we burden them with our disappointment, anger, controlling, and neglect. You can program a robot not to do any of those things. On many occasions, I've interacted with my online artificial intelligence program, and I've been quite surprised at the depth and breadth of its understanding of real love. As we input articles and so on, it's become brilliant at regurgitating the principles, and it can apply them to parenting. It can solve parenting problems. AI can. As horrifying as it is to say out loud, I suggest that a random child born today would become more loving, responsible, and happy if raised by a real love AI robot than by the average parent who is crippled by both the emotional wounds of a lifetime and a near total ignorance of the unconditional love needed by a child. That's horrifying to say. and it's true. But I still have hope for parents. I still write blogs and post videos about real love and parenting. And this is a good time for me to remind you to subscribe to this YouTube channel so you can learn how to be a loving parent. Right now, we as parents are not doing as well in raising our children as robots would. We're not as good as robots. Overall, average. That will continue to be true until parents are willing to examine their responsibility for loving and teaching their kids. Let me teach you how. Practically, simply, click the link below.